call the committee, the MPO Policy Committee meeting to order. Erin, can you call the roll, please?
There you are. Okay.
Yes, sounds good. And if I don't hear from the member, if you could identify yourself as the alternate. But before I do, let me just mention too that as permitted by the governor's declaration, disaster declaration of May 27th, 2020, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is neither practical nor prudent for the MPO Policy Committee. So to ensure an open and transparent meeting as possible, the meeting materials were posted 1 week in advance, and a recording of this meeting will be provided and linked on our website, and all votes will be taken via roll call. So with that, let me call the roll. IDOT?
Hallie Bieneman, representing Secretary Omar Osman.
Thank you. CDOT?
Yes, here, Commissioner Biaggi here, just logging in.
Thanks so much. Cmap, Frank Beal?
Present.
Cmap, Matt Brawley?
John Oak, it's alternate for Matt Brawley.
Thank you, Mario. CTA?
Mike Conley as an alternate for Dorval Carter.
Thank you. Cook County?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sis Killen.
Good morning. Council of Mayors, Mayor Schilke?
Jeff Schelke, representing the Council of Mayors, Mayor Batavia.
DuPage County?
Dan Cronin here. I think Chris Snyder is also participating.
Thank you. FHWA?
Good morning, Arlene Coker here.
Good morning. FTA?
Morning, Tony Greep representing FTA on behalf of Kelly Brookins.
Thank you. Tollway?
Buongiorno, this is Rocco Zakil representing Director Alvarez this morning.
Good morning.
Morning,
Kane
Rocco.
County? Kane County?
Tom Rickard here. Good morning, representing the County Board Chair.
Thank you. Kendall County? Lake County?
Good morning, Shane Schneider representing County Board Chair Hart.
Thank you. McHenry County? Metro?
Good morning, Lynette Civarella representing Executive Director Jim Dewinski.
Thank you. Pace?
Eric Llewellyn representing Chairman Kwasniewski for PACE.
Thank you. RTA?
Leanne Redden here, representing RTA.
Will County?
Here, thank you, Jennifer Bertino Tarrant.
Good morning. Class 1 railroads? All right. Can move ahead. We have a quorum.
Thanks, Erin. Appreciate that. So moving on to agenda item number 2, any changes to the agenda or announcements from anybody? I think from my end, I think the agenda is good to go. So we will proceed to agenda item number 3, and that's approval of the minutes from the January 14 meeting. Any changes to that? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Jeff Schelke moves
So
to
moved.
approval.
We've got Mayor Schilke and also Commissioner Biaggi. I'll call the roll.
Thanks, Erin.
IDOT?
Yes.
CDOT?
Yes.
CMAP, Frank Beal?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. CMAP, Mayor Noak?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County?
Yes.
Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County?
Aye.
FTA? Oh, not FTA, my apologies. Tollway?
Yes.
Kane County?
Yes.
Kendall County? Lake County?
Yes.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metro?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
And Will County?
Yes.
Great.
Erin, did you skip CTA?
Oh, did I skip CTA? No, I think
Okay,
I think we're
No,
good.
I voted.
okay, good, Mike, good to hear. Sorry, I guess I just missed that one. So it sounds like motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, agency reports. Erin, can you give us an executive director report? Thanks.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for joining us this morning. First, I just wanted to start with a couple of congratulatory notes to folks who, Secretary Osmond is not on the line this morning, but he did receive WTS, the Women's Transportation Seminars Ray LaHood Award for being a leader in advancing and advocating for women in our industry. Thank you to him for all he has done, and it's appropriate that this is Women's History Month. So also congratulations. I don't know that many of you work with her, but Pam Simon, who is the Director of Office of Workforce and Business Diversity at the Illinois Department of Transportation, received WTS's Woman of the Year Award. And Pam and I used to share an office wall in my Springfield office. So congratulations to her, it's well deserved. And then also to Sis Killen on behalf of Cook County, under her leadership and the leadership of John Yonan, a friend of all of ours, they received the Innovative Solutions Award for their Fair Transit project. Congratulations to them. And also, I believe congratulations are in order for Sis for officially being named Cook County Superintendent. So congratulations. I just wanted to touch on a couple items that are relevant to this committee, although many of you in this committees have been involved and engaged in a number of our ongoing projects, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But, you know, in January, we talked about our mobility recovery project that we're working closely with the RTA on, and, you know, we continue to advance that work. We hosted a working group of people from across the region, including many of you here on the phone call. Steering committee members really provided us with feedback on the initial approach to develop a policy framework and figure out what the financial sustainability could be for alternative future scenarios of what our transportation system might look like, and, you know, how we address some of the challenges that might be coming around the corner here as we look to economic recovery here. We will continue to bring updates to this committee as they're relevant. We anticipate this continuing to be an iterative process, where as there are opportunities for us to engage and educate and advocate for different things to happen in our region, that we will continue to keep you all involved. We also, I'll just remind folks to mute yourselves if you're not on mute. But we also held a safety resource group in January with, again, a number of folks from this committee. The action agenda really is going to be, again, iterative, but thinking about how we can begin to work with our communities, think about how we make our region a safer place. I know that I, for one, received a City of Chicago warning that I was going 6 miles over the limit. And actually, I thought, I'll just mention, Commissioner Biaggi, that the message—
You're welcome.
Yeah, I know, right? Thank you. But the message in the letter was, I thought, really thoughtful. It talks about how, and I'll blame my husband, actually, I don't think it was me, but how a lot of the fatalities are related to children, right, and crossing areas. And so I think it's that type of approach, right? How do we message this? How do we make sure that we're talking about traffic safety in meaningful ways to get people to change behaviors? So I also just had a couple of regional meetings. Last month, I participated in Cook County's Transit Steering Committee. I know many of you were there as well, but I think, you know, the goal of increasing overall transit ridership and increasing the seamlessness of transit services, and really focus in on the needs of transit reliant communities is the goal of that project. So we've also been really talking to our partners about how we might utilize our community cohorts tools. We begin to think about economic recovery. How do we identify communities that are in the highest need, and really figure out the best ways to not only lift them up, apply resources, but also begin to build capacity in communities to be able to be more resilient. Yesterday, I'll also note, sort of related, is that our board approved 2 proposals to advance the work on equity. First, we will be developing a pilot program to address the challenges of engaging with community stakeholders who are representative of the region's diversity, and really make sure that this representation is incorporated into our plans and programs for the long term across the entirety of the region. Secondly, we'll be bringing on a consultant internally to help us develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion roadmap for the agency that'll look at things from our hiring practices to our procurement practices to also how we engage with the public and how we engage with you as well. So both of those things we're excited about, and I think that we would love to bring lessons learned and shared learnings to this committee as well. Just a couple more notes here. We closed our joint call for projects with the RTA for the planning assistance. We focused this call for projects really on high need communities across the Cmap region, and selected projects will span northeastern Illinois from Waukegan and northern Lake County to Robbins and southern Cook. I wanted to give you sort of a taste of the types of projects that will be undertaken over the next year or so. In Robbins, for example, our staff is going to work with local officials to implement previous recommendations to address flooding issues that they experience in Robbins, and really hope that those projects help spur greater economic development and create new opportunities for recreation in the community. And then another example of a project that we'll be working on is with Berkeley and Harvey. They asked for some assistance in thinking about open space, outdoor dining, the public way, and how to really reframe and reformat and take advantage of what's been going on. And we're partnering them with two higher capacity communities, Lamont and Morton Grove, to really develop a shared process, a model for us bringing sort of low capacity and high capacity communities together to be able to network and learn from one another about and build that capacity to do new things. So overall, we received requests for assistance from 27 high and very high need communities across our region. We'll be able to provide support to 22 of those applications that came in. And lastly, I'll just note that we continue to pay attention to how traffic patterns are changing. We recently updated our latest analysis with data through January. The latest analysis shows a decrease in traffic volumes across all vehicle classes, including commercial vehicles within the past few months. The decline is likely a result of the mitigation efforts that were put in place as the COVID-19 restrictions were put into place in late fall. But I will note that we are seeing, again, things that you all know, but expressway speeds are significantly higher than before the start of the pandemic. And our transit systems continue to see significant reduced ridership. So again, we hope we'll have updates on a monthly basis going forward. And I know RTA puts out a really helpful collaborative report from all of the transit agencies. With that, that concludes my report. Oh, you're on mute, Leanne. Sorry.
No, I know. It's our daily existence, right? Are you also going to provide us the Cmap board report?
I am happy to give the Cmap board report as well. So just a brief overview of the board meeting yesterday. We approved our annual budget and work plan, UWP work plan. You'll see the UWP work plan on the agenda here today in just a moment. And then we also, the board also approved performance measures for safety and for transit safety specifically, and for pavement conditions as well. And those were both approved. We also received a presentation on fares, fines, and fees. And so Lindsay is here today, and you'll also hear about our recent research and our upcoming report on how fines, fares, and fees really impact low-income communities across our region. So that was a brief recap. You'll see some of that stuff today.
All right, thanks, Erin. Mayor Shelkey, can you provide us with a Council of Mayors report? Thanks.
Yeah, my honor to do so. First of all, our next meeting of the Council of Mayors Executive Committee will be on Tuesday, April 20th at 9:30 a.m. Our last meeting was January 19th, and on that meeting, we received an update on the recent work of the Hstp Project Selection Committee. The committee also received an update from the IDOT local roads, and the Cmap staff then provided an overview of the Regional Safety Action Agenda, which will lay out policy, research, and guidance that Cmap and other agencies can then use to achieve safety targets. The Regional Safety Action Agenda is building on prior research from the Traffic Safety White Paper. Staff also presented updates on the local government network's outreach to municipalities on a call on planning assistance that is in cooperation with the RTA. The committee also engaged in a conversation with Cmap's state and federal staffs relative to state and federal legislative agendas. And I just also like to just share that in a few weeks, April 6th, we're going to have the big municipal election for the region. This is the election where the vast majority of mayors and village presidents are up for re-election, as are at least probably half of every city council and village board will also be up for re-election on that day. So there could be some significant changes in faces depending on what happens throughout the 284 cities that are in our area, cities and villages. But I think this whole thing really speaks to the value that Cmap brings to this region, because with a lot of new faces potentially coming on board, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of ideas. And I think we've got a staff here that really is on top of things and will be able to hopefully give some direction and viewpoints and vision to some of these new people as to what we are doing in the region and why we can and why we can't do many of the things. So I'm very proud of the professionalization of the Cmap group. It's been there for a long time, but certainly under Aaron's leadership, it I think has really, again, continued to build itself. And I'm just very proud that we are doing all the things we are doing, because there are going to be a whole bunch of people here in a few weeks. They're going to be looking for answers to a lot of questions they have. So it's good that I think we're ready to meet the new voices and engage them and integrate them into the governmental services that this region has, and hopefully will continue to provide with great professionalism in the days ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate that. Any questions for the Mayor or Aaron on any of their reports? All right. Moving on to item number 5, FY 2022 Unified Work Program. Angela Manning-Hardeman, are you going to provide us that report?
Yes, thank you, Leanne. Good morning, MPO Policy Committee. Today, I would like to provide you with an overview of the FY 22 UWP budget for your approval. This budget was presented and approved yesterday by the Cmap board, in addition to Cmap's annual comprehensive work plan and budget. This budget has also been approved by the UWP Committee, the Coordinating Committee, and the Transportation Committee. In accordance with an accelerated schedule approved by the UWP Committee to meet IDOT's submission timeline of April 1st of this year, Cmap issued on November 2nd a call for projects for fiscal year 22. Due to the accelerated UWP schedule, the pandemic's impact on local budgets, and the request by federal and state partners to spend funds more efficiently and move away from a 5-year agreement, the UWP Committee voted to pause the competitive program and only conduct a core program this year. The competitive program will be evaluated over the remainder of the current fiscal year to develop a program that incorporates stronger performance measures and more efficient expenditures of resources. A new UWP competitive program will be introduced with the FY 23 budget process. For fiscal year 22 call for projects, only core proposals were submitted. The agency received 8 in total. The budget that's being presented today, the UWP budget, reflects efforts to ensure that Cmap remains operational and provides for the core transportation planning dollars for the City of Chicago, the Council of Mayors, McHenry County, and the transit agencies. Federal funding is estimated to be $18.7 million this year, unchanged from our prior fiscal year. And with the required match, the total UWP program for 22 is $23.4 million. We received $23.4 million in core proposals, of which 18.7 was federal funds. And an overview of each core program was presented and discussed at the UWP committee meeting on December 9th. Included in your memo and in the UWP document that you have at your place are the details of each agency's core programs and their expenditure details. In summary, the UWP partners programs were fully funded and budgets increased anywhere between 4 to 59% depending on the request. Cmap's UWP funding increased by less than 1%. And so today I'm seeking the MPO Policies Committee approval on the FY 22 UWP budget. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Angela?
This is Holly. I'd just like to make a comment that I know this was a lot of hard work and a lot of discussing and collaboration, and really appreciate you all moving forward with speeding this process up and working with us as we navigate the pandemic. So thank you all for that.
All right, anyone else? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the FY 2022 UWP program. Again, can you state your name with the motion and then adding the second, so we've got that for the record.
Motion Noak.
Second, Shelkey.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Erin, can you call the roll? And actually, Erin, before you do that, it looks like I think Kendall County has joined us. I think I saw that pop up in the chat. Is that correct? So we should recognize Kendall County's now in the meeting too. Thanks.
Great, thank you. IDOT.
Aye.
CDOT.
Yes.
Cmap Frank Beal.
Yes.
Cmap Marinoke.
Yes.
CTA.
Yes.
Cook County.
Yes.
Council of Mayors.
Yes.
DuPage County.
Yes.
Tollway.
Yes.
Kane County.
Yes.
Kendall County. Double check on Kendall. Lake County.
Yes.
McHenry County.
Yes.
Metra.
Yes.
Pace.
Yes.
RTA.
Yes.
And Will County.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to item number 6, the asset condition and safety targets for approval. Who is presenting that?
We have a recorded video, and then Martin Manager is on the line to answer questions after we run through the video.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks.
Of course.
Good morning. I'm going to be talking about 2 of our federal required performance measures today. Transit safety is new to Cmap, and the pavement condition measures have a revised methodology. These performance measures are part of the federal effort to encourage performance-based programming at all levels of transportation decision-making. Federal rulemaking for performance measures coming out of MAP 21 and the FAST Act are grouped into 5 areas. States, MPOs, and transit agencies are required to set targets and track progress towards achievement. Targets for the first 4 areas listed on this slide were adopted as part of the On to 2050 plan in 2018. The Transit Safety Rule, number 5, was still being finalized at that time. Staff will be examining all of these measures over the next year and a half in preparation for the On to 2050 update in 2022. As detailed in the memos included in your meeting packet, we will be asking for approval of the following targets. We will start with transit safety. For both measures we discussed today, we have collaborated with key partners in developing the targets. While the current federal rule only directly applies to CTA and PACE, Cmap hosted 2 transit safety roundtables that also included Metra, IDOT, the Federal Transit Administration, and the RTA. CTA and PACE were required to develop detailed safety plans that bring new accountability and consistency to their safety work. Metra is also developing a safety plan under the Federal Railroad Administration rules, but MPOs are not required to set safety targets for commuter rail. In their safety plans, CTA and PACE set ambitious but achievable targets that align with Cmap's past safety targets and efforts. Cmap staff recommends supporting targets that are based on targets set by CTA and PACE. The regional targets shown here are the same as those adopted by the transit agencies, with the exception of the bus targets, where the regional targets are a weighted blend of CTA and PACE. There are 4 target areas with a target value and rate for the first 3. Similar to highway targets, measures of fatalities and serious injuries are included. Transit agencies are also required to track safety events, such as collisions, fires, spills, and some crimes. The final measure tracks reliability, measured as the mean distance between mechanical failure. This is the only measure where a higher value is better. The Highway Asset Condition Performance Area, known as PM2, covers pavement and bridge condition on the national highway system. Targets were set for bridges and pavement with Onto 2050. However, Cmap used a methodology for pavement that was temporarily allowed until data for the official federal method was available. That data is now available, and so we are updating our targets accordingly. There are 4 federal measures for pavement condition, 2 for interstates and 2 for non-interstate national highway system roads. The first column shows the baseline data that was available to set Onto 2050 targets. This data only used the International Roughness Index, or IRI methodology, to assess pavement condition. The next column, labeled Cmap 4-year target, is the target set using that baseline data. The last column are IDOT's new pavement
Jane, I think you have to unmute yourself in order for us to continue to hear the presentation.
management plan, or TAMP. The IDOT TAMP calls for moving away from a worst first approach to a more strategic investment strategy that programs projects throughout the roadway pavement lifecycle, an approach that Cmap has advocated for. Therefore, staff recommend that the board and MPO support these new IDOT pavement condition targets. Adopting targets is just one step in the performance programming cycle. Staff will continue to work with IDOT and the transit agencies to understand their efforts and identify ways for Cmap and our partners to contribute. All federal performance measures will be revised along with the Onto 2050 update in 2022. Staff will be working with committees to update targets over the next year and a half. In closing, we are seeking approval for both sets of targets. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. That concludes the presentation. So I do think we need, before we move on, a vote of approval, but Martin is here to answer questions about transit safety target, as well as I'm sure our transit agencies operators are available and the RTA. And then on pavement condition targets, I believe Todd Schmidt is also available if there are questions.
So any questions for Martin or Todd on these metrics? If not, I don't see any hands. I will entertain a motion to approve the 2022 transit safety targets and the 2021 pavement condition targets. Again, state your name with the motion so we can keep that for the record.
Motion approved, Noak.
How about we take Sis as the motion and Mayor Noak as the second?
Sounds great.
Erin, can you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Yes.
Cmap Frank Beal?
Yes.
Cmap Mayor Noak?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County?
Yes.
Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County? Tolway?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
2. That's okay. No, thank you.
Hey, who's working for the tollway now who said yes for us? I'm on board. Welcome to the team, whoever it is.
That's what I want to do in life. That's where I want to be. I want to be you, Rocco.
Short, fat, and happy. Way to go.
So I've got a yes for DuPage County and a yes for Tolway. Kane County?
Yes.
Kendall County?
Yes.
Thank you, Scott. Lake County?
Yes.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
And Will County. I believe County Executive had to hop off here. So motion carries.
Thanks, Erin. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is the federal fiscal year 2021 Federal Transit Administration funding allocations. I think, Terry, are you good to go? Otherwise, I can pitch it for you, however we want to do this one.
I'm good to go.
Okay, good.
Okay. And then you can jump in at any time, ma'am.
I never jump in.
Oh, okay. Well, just drift in. Anyway, good morning, everyone. So there are 2 federal funding allocations for your consideration today. The first is a part of the emergency COVID relief funding for transit that Congress passed on December 27th. And Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, known as CRESA. Traditionally, FTA funds are used for capital only. However, CRESA funding allows for reimbursement of lost operating revenues and public funds due to COVID. RTA has worked with our partner MPOs, in this case, just Northwestern Indiana, through NERPC, since no apportionments were posted for the Wisconsin area through Uwp. Based on the mutual agreement with NERPC, all of the CRESA funds of $486,197,475 apportioned to the UZA will go to Northeastern Illinois and will be allocated amongst the service boards. The RTA has led a 3-month process based on a critical need analysis, or CNA, and based the recommended funding allocation for this funding on this methodology. Following a public comment period, the RTA board will consider the recommended allocations at their March 18th board meeting. The LOU has been signed by NERPC and will go for RTA board consideration March 18th. Secondly, we have the annual capital apportionments. On January 19th, 2021, the Federal Transit Administration published the full federal fiscal year 2021 apportionment for the 4 federal formula programs: the 5307, 5340 urbanized area formula programs, the 5337 state of good repair, the 5339 bus and bus facilities, and the 5310 enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities through September 30th, 2021 as an extension of the FAST Act. RTA, NERPC, and Uwp have reached an agreement on allocations of these fundings to each region as follows. And it's a lot of numbers, folks. Out of the $555,620,006 of combined 5307, 5340, 5337, and 5339 funding, $526,657,566 will go to RTA, $28,756,201 to NERPC, and $206,253 to Uwp. These sources of funding are going to be used to fund capital projects. The agreement on the allocations for the 5310 funding is $6,656,429 that will go to the RTA, $474,851 to NERPC, and $23,190.97, which I think they're going to round up, to Uwp. Therefore, today we are requesting MPO approval of area allocations with Indiana and Wisconsin for the CRESA and the annual federal formula funding allocations. And all of these are contingent on RTA board approval March 18th. If there are any questions.
I just wanted to offer a comment if I may. So Leanne, so I sent, on behalf of DuPage County, I sent a letter to Chairman Dillard. Certainly we understand these are unprecedented times, and we're supportive of this, but I do think it's important to note for the record that this is a one-time distribution. It is unprecedented in the way that the allocations are distributed. So, but yeah, I understand it and I support it on behalf of DuPage County, but I also want to make sure, that this is something that's unusual because of these unusual circumstances that we're in, right?
Correct. And Chairman Crum, I appreciate those comments. And we did receive that letter from you, as well as several other public comments. And I just to clarify what's happening here today, this is not approving at the MPO level the allocations within our region. This is the allocations to our broader urbanized area. So the way the federal program works, from their perspective, our urbanized area is larger than our RTA region. And so every time they appropriate funds, we have to sub-allocate to Indiana and Wisconsin. So on the CRISA piece, which was the first piece Terry went through there, this was to note essentially that in our negotiations and discussions with Indiana, we will be keeping actually all the monies in our region, and there will be no sub-allocation to Indiana for the CRISA funds. So I guess that's a good thing for our region. It was more money staying, and that was specifically because the critical need is within our area, and the operators there recognized that they did not have that critical deficits in their operating budgets at the current time. The second piece is the federal formula allocations, which are based on National Transit Database criteria, et cetera, and the formula programs that are dictated specifically by federal formula. And so that's, again, the sub-allocation of those dollars into Wisconsin and Indiana as well for the capital projects. So there's sort of those two things. It is a little complicated. It is different to normal because of the CRISA being for operating dollars. Right. Luckily, we can keep those in. And then the second part, as you were referencing, is the sub allocation, if you will, within our region, which will happen at our board meeting next week. And we do recognize that these are unprecedented times. These are emergency relief dollars. We do know that people do have raised questions and concerns about sort of those allocations for this round, but recognizing that, as we all heard yesterday, another round of relief dollars have passed too. So we want to get these ones allocated and start working on the sub allocation for a much larger pot of money coming in the coming months. So I appreciate those comments, and we will address that more thoroughly at our board meeting next week.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
No worries. So any other questions or comments from anybody on the policy committee?
Moved by Shelkey for approval.
Do we have a second?
Second by CDOT.
Thank you. Erin, can you call the roll, please?
CDOT?
Yes.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, CDOT. Sorry.
Gotcha both. Cmap.
The other dot.
Cmap Frankfield.
Yes.
Cmap Marinoke.
Yes.
CTA.
Yes.
Cook County.
Yes.
Council of Mayors.
Yes.
DuPage County.
Yes.
Tollway.
Yes.
Kane County.
Yes.
Kendall County.
Yes.
Lake County.
Yes.
McHenry County.
Yes.
Metra.
Yes.
Pace.
Yes.
RTA. Will County? And just confirm, I didn't hear you, Leanne, but I saw it.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Motion carries.
All right, thanks. I think I must have spoken before the unmute ticked off, right? Okay, so moving on to item number 8, equity in fees, fines, and fares project. A little tongue twister there, elocution lesson needed. But I think Erin and Lindsay, you will run through, I think it's Lindsay's going to make a presentation for us on that topic.
Yeah, thank you. And while Lindsay queues up, we are excited to present this work to you. It's been the culmination of, over a year's worth of work with committees and stakeholders to talk about how we think about our fees, fines, and fares and how they might present barriers to people being able to have access to jobs, access to high quality of life. And so with that, let me just turn it over to Lindsay to get into the work.
Great, thanks, Erin. Some of you may remember about a year ago, we actually came to this group to present about the beginnings of this work. And actually, next slide, please. And the goal of this work has really been to look at ONTO 2050 recommendations to use user fees to fully fund the transportation system and see how they could be reconciled with ONTO 2050's other recommendations to leverage the transportation network to promote inclusive growth. And like Erin said, we really wanted to assess how affordable transportation fees, fines, and fares really are for residents with low income in the region, and also look at outcomes and consequences of those impacts, including for how residents are able to access the transportation network. And we're going to be publishing a report on our findings in the spring. Next slide, please. So our goals for undertaking this work were twofold. So not only have we focused on assessing these equity impacts on residents low income, we also wanted to develop strategies to reduce any disproportionate impacts that we found through our analysis. Next slide. And as Erin mentioned, throughout this process, we've really worked to engage a broad set of partners. We had conversations with experts and stakeholders throughout the region, and we also convened a group to engage with some of our partners on a more regular basis. The group met several times throughout the past year and a half to review our assessment of the equity of fees, fines, and fares, and also help identify strategies to reduce those impacts. And our resource group included all the partners you see on the screen here, transit agencies, Tollway, Cook County, City of Chicago, as well as others from the Center for Neighborhood Technology, UIC researchers, the Metropolitan Planning Council, and other civic groups. Next slide, please. And as part of the process, we started by selecting several fees, fines, and fares for evaluation in consultation with that resource group. And we looked at the motor fuel tax. We looked at ONTO 2050's recommendation for a proposed road usage charge. We looked at traffic violations and delinquency fines, transit fares, tolling, price parking, state and local motor vehicle registration fees, and we also looked at T&C fees, such as those that the City of Chicago and a couple other municipalities in the region impose on Uber and Lyft rides. And we wanted to understand to what degree are residents with lower incomes impacted by these fees, fines, and fares, and also are they disproportionately burdened by these fees, fines, and fares? Next slide, please. And actually, before I move on to challenges and findings, does anybody have any questions to start off? Sounds like not. So I will I will move on to some of the challenges that the region has in improving equity in the transportation network. So one large challenge is that nearly 12% of residents in the larger Chicago metropolitan area live in poverty. That rate's actually greater for residents living with disabilities, as well as residents who are Black or of Hispanic or Latino origin. Next slide, please. And our analysis of consumer expenditure data for the region, and is also national data, indicates that people in poverty often struggle to pay for even basic expenses. And often people in poverty are also unbanked or underbanked. And what does that mean? That means that they lack access or ability to utilize a bank account. And in Illinois, it's estimated that 41% of households with annual income under $30,000 are either unbanked or underbanked. Next slide, please. And for households with lower income, any expense, including the cost of transportation to work, school, and everyday activities, is often unaffordable. And the cost of owning a vehicle is high, but many households in residents with lower income and residents of color lack access to transit options that can connect them to jobs within a reasonable travel time. Next slide, please. Another major challenge for this region is that the transportation system is in need of significant investment. And this is a major impediment to achieving the region's mobility equity goals. And particularly for transit, as you can see on this chart, the system requires billions of dollars of additional investment over and above current sources over the next 30 years just to maintain the system we have, let alone meet targets for state of good repair. Next slide, please. Moving on to some of the key findings from the project. We had many findings that we analyzed, but I'll share a few today. One, these fees, fines, and fares really function as part of the tax burden as a whole, where any broad-based tax or fee does have the potential to be regressive if it's not based in income level. We found that the Nonpartisan Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy actually ranked Illinois' tax system as the 8th most regressive structure in the United States. And that's, can you go back, please? And that's due to its flat income tax and comparatively low income tax exemptions. And you can see this chart from their analysis shows total taxes paid as a percent of income. And you can see on the left, Illinois taxpayers in the lowest 20% of incomes pay 14% of their income in taxes and fees overall, and those in the top 5% pay less than 10% of their income in taxes and fees. Next slide, please. In our assessment of the equity of fees, fines, and fares, we focused on households making less than 60% of the region's median income level. And when we drilled down into the fees associated with driving, we found that motor fuel taxes, registration fees, and tolls didn't actually represent a disproportionate burden for households with low income. And why is that? That's because these households tend to own fewer vehicles, and they tend to drive fewer miles than households in other income groups. And you can see here on the screen, households with low income drive an average of 20 miles per day, and that's actually less than half of the regional average. And this really impacts the amount that these drivers pay for vehicle registration fees, for motor fuel taxes, and also for tolls. Next slide, please. And when we looked at these same fees, we actually found that these costs are a small part of the overall cost of driving. But that overall cost of driving does remain a high burden for households with low income without mobility options like transit or even being able to walk or bike to where they need to go. And while households with lower income do drive less and they do own fewer vehicles because it's so expensive, they still do drive, and most households with low income do actually own or lease a vehicle. And that results in them needing to spend a lot on transportation. Next slide, please. Our analysis actually indicates that households with low income in the Chicago area spend 16% of their income on transportation costs. And you can see on this chart, households with more income are able to just dedicate less of their income to transportation costs on average. And looking at these bars, most of the costs that are associated with transportation costs are for just simply owning and maintaining a vehicle, and just a small portion of the costs are attributable to these transportation fees, fines, and fares. Next slide, please. Residents of all income levels in the region do rely on transit, as we all know, but it's really crucial for residents with low incomes. Our modeling indicated that households with low income actually take 20% more transit trips than other households. But when you exclude work commutes from that computation, these households actually take twice as many trips. And so that shows us that they are more likely to use transit just to live their daily lives and take transit trips to go shopping and other purposes. Next slide, please. The cost of a fare really varies by many factors, and some of those factors can result in the cost of a transit fare taking up a relatively high share of earnings for a household with low income. And you can look at this chart. This is just an example, and this chart provides an overview of the annual cost of paying for a transit monthly pass as a share of income, and with example incomes for low, high, and medium, and for low income households in purple, for medium green, and high in teal. And as you can see, for households with lower income, it can comprise a relatively high share of earnings relative to other households. Next slide, please. Moving on to traffic violation fines. When we looked at traffic violation fine amounts, we found that households with lower income may pay a substantially larger share of weekly wages on a fine than households with higher incomes. And with this high burden, some drivers are just unable to pay their fines, and that can result in late fees. Next slide, please. And the fines plus the associated fees on top of that sometimes can compound, and that can become a major source of debt for residents with lower incomes. People with fine debt may experience bankruptcy, tax garnishment, or even damage to their credit score. Next slide, please. Before I move on to discussing recommendations and next steps, does anyone have any questions about our findings?
Any questions so far for Lindsay? Don't see or hear anyone, so continue on, Lindsay.
Okay, so improving mobility for residents with low income will require significant investments in transit access and bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, but also it's going to require funding to administer programs and also funding to recoup any resident revenue losses from reducing fees or fares in any way, shape, or form. And when we looked at different strategies to reduce disproportionate impacts on households with low income, we really tried to think about all that and balance everything when we considered what we wanted to push forward. And Cmap and the resource group considered a variety of strategies beyond the ones that you see on your screen to figure out what recommendations were really going to best meet the goals of reducing impacts, but also meeting on 2050 goals and balancing revenue needs. And this is an overview of the recommendations, but I'm going to go through each one of these in turn. So next slide, please. First off, a really effective way of reducing the impact of transportation costs, as well as just the cost of fees, fines, or fares, is just to provide people with an option not to drive. And to do that, we'll need to work towards implementing more on 2050 recommendations to invest in lower cost mobility options like transit and also bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. As you can see on this chart, alternative modes of transportation are important to people in every income level, but workers on both the upper end of the spectrum and the lower end of the spectrum are actually less likely to travel to work by car. Next slide, please. Next, introducing more progressivity into the income tax would just reduce the regressiveness of the overall tax burden, and that would mitigate any impacts of transportation fees, fines, or fares, as well as other sales and excise taxes. And to do this, there are a number of options that the state could pursue. So it's possible to approve legislation to reduce the income tax burden through increasing the personal exemption. That's on that chart in green or teal, really. Another option is to implement graduated rates. some example graduated rates we looked at are in purple on the chart. And another option that isn't on this chart is to expand or increase the state earned income tax credit. Next slide, please. Next, make transportation fees more affordable for households with low income. And there are several ways that the recommendation provides for potentially achieving this goal. One, expanding reduced transit fares and vehicle registration fees to all households with low income. Currently, low-income residents who are seniors or who have disabilities are eligible for reduced fares and reduced vehicle fees, but we could expand criteria to any resident meeting low-income criteria. Also, looking at varying state and local vehicle registration fees to be based on vehicle value. And lastly, ensuring that any new TNC fees support regional transit goals. Next slide, please. Improving access to lower cost tools for households with low income. So there are several ways that already you can lower the fees or fares that you pay, and it's important to work to expand access to programs like that. So that could mean looking at the transit benefit fare program that provides income tax reductions on the money that people spend on their transit fares. That also can mean looking at iPass. So it turns out the tollway is already looking at pursuing an expansion to their iPass Assist program to help more low-income drivers access iPass transponders. And as was announced as part of the announcement for the end of cash tolls. But even if we were to eliminate the deposit on these transponders for a group of people eligible, in the long term, developing a lower cost alternative to an iPass transponder could just reduce the need to require a deposit in the first place. Next slide, please. Pilot initiatives that coordinate fee and fare collection. So we all know residents must navigate many public agencies to pay fees and fares, and just making it easier for them to pay these fees and fares could increase compliance and also could reduce the incidence of late fees and fines. And so this could include initiatives to allow for people to obtain an iPass or pay municipal vehicle fees at the Illinois Secretary of State or other publicly accessible facilities or retailers. This also includes onto 2050's recommendations to implement full fare integration across service providers, including transit services and other modes of transportation. Next slide, please. Make paying for parking more feasible for both residents and delivery drivers. So we looked at the importance of really making sure that there's short-term parking available for people that can be paid with a variety of payment options, not just credit cards, and also that have limited transaction fees. And this can help drivers that don't have credit cards, who are unbanked. This can help delivery drivers and really just help people avoid parking fines in the first place. Next slide, please. And lastly, looking at implementing a package of traffic and parking fine reforms. So just last month, the state actually enacted legislative changes that eliminate holds on license renewal and license suspensions for failure to pay traffic and red light tickets. But more reforms are needed. And for local governments, there are several areas that could be looked at to improve practices. That can include assessing fine levels to make sure that they meet safety rather than revenue goals, and also reforming repayment plans. But more broadly, we'd really like to see fines structured so that people can actually afford to pay them. And to pilot a new structure, we would need changes to state statute to allow for income-based fines or ability to pay waivers. Next slide, please. So that wraps up my presentation. I'm happy to take questions or get feedback. We'd love to get more feedback on this work. And we'd also really just be interested to hear how these recommendations align with equity work in your agency and what synergies you see around your agency's priorities around equity.
Thanks, Lynn. That's a very detailed presentation. And I guess I'd open it up to questions, comments from the audience, from the committee.
Yeah, Leanne, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, sis.
Okay, I want to commend Cmap for their work here. This really translates very well to the work that Cook County is doing, specifically our Fair Transit pilot, which at its core is all about transit equity. You know, we too recognize that transportation costs, when unaffordable and really become a burden to low-income residents, how that really does not provide the same opportunities with access to jobs, educations, and services. We also recognize that business expansion and retention is also related to the ability to provide transit access so that these employers have access to a robust workforce. So I think these policies really align with the equity work that we see here at Cook County. And for those who may not be aware, the Fair Transit pilot in partnership with both Metra and PACE, at this point, this is going to be a phased rollout. And, you know, we opted to do this in the midst of a pandemic so that we could provide that emergency relief to our critical workers, again, going back to critical need areas and those who are performing essential services, to provide that immediate relief for South Suburban Cook residents who do expend a substantially larger amount of their annual income on transportation needs. It also unlocks resource to perhaps more efficient and effective transit options for them as they try to reach job centers across the county. But again, focusing on that opportunity that, you know, we're trying to build and expand business resources in areas where we already have built up environment and infrastructure, and how, you know, they could look to do that so that we aren't working with transit agencies. We always hear the conversation about having to, you know, chase residents, you know, further out as they locate their homes in areas further away from transit. We really want to support, you know, denser urban areas in and around transit and encourage business opportunities in that space as well. And just one second point, Rocco, I saw you kind of chiming in here, so it may be a little bit redundant, but, you know, thinking about opportunities that we have and the tollways work with the Central Tri-State, you know, specifically for South Cook, providing that flex lane with transit access, really unlocking job opportunities. We recognize that this region was built upon industry and its access to transit, and how we all need to come together to make sure we're implementing policies and pilots and projects within our purview to help support that effort. Thank you.
Thanks, sis. Anyone else have other thoughts, comments for Lindsay? Rocco?
If I may, it's always hard following sis, the smart one in the room, in her room anyway. So I want to also, you know, echo a lot of what sis had to say. I do appreciate Aaron first, the letter to the editor supporting what the initiatives that the tollway announced, and Lindsay, really to you, and you know, for really spearheading this effort. It really did help guide a lot of our decision makings, and really looking forward to the, you know, working on some of the next steps with you and Cmap, really to assist us in reaching out to some of these underserved areas, and for both education, how do we get to the unbanked population, and really, I think Lindsay, you said, I mean, we just want to make sure, give people the most equitable way of paying for things as possible. Right now, we realized it was an unfair system. If you didn't pay a toll, you were getting hit with a $20 violation. So we've changed some of that. There's now an invoice fee for that, but that's, you know, a first nice step. The next step is really to figure out how to put an iPass in people's hands to afford them the ability to pay at a discounted rate. Why should they have to pay a higher rate because they don't have an iPass? So that's really our next big push is with this assist program. How do we get things, how do we make it easier for people? And how do we serve the communities where maybe we don't do a very good job of serving? Not maybe, we don't do a very good job of serving right now. We know we don't. It's just not, you know, we've got our iPass offices, we have the tollway. You know, so again, we're going to continue to look to Cmap to help us out as we continue to roll out programs and seek new programs. And insist your point about transit, absolutely. You know, we stand as a partner on trying to figure that out. We get it. We are part of the regional transportation system, and we want to do as much as our part. You know, I'll say this, and our director, I would say the same thing. We look at this is what our job is, and we just have to keep improving what we do with our job. And you know, these are things, yeah, we should celebrate them, but this is, I think these are our responsibilities collectively on serving all participants and commuters in the region. So again, thanks again for all you guys have done thus far. It's been fun working with you on these issues, and you know, looking forward to continued implementation, because that's our goal. So thank you.
Thanks, Rocco. Anyone else with any comments or questions?
The only thought I had, Leanne, was seeking more equitable and more fair policies when it comes to fees, fines, and fares is good, is meritorious, no doubt about it. I do think, though, when you talk about reforming traffic violation fine reform, I think you have to be safety has to be your first and foremost objective there. So maybe sometimes a significant fine deters people from speeding, and speeding causes a lot of serious accidents.
Thanks, Chairman. Anyone else?
I'd like, as Mayor Noak, Jim Healy from DuPage brought up some good points yesterday too, is on the traffic fines and the fines is, we also have to be careful about where some of those fees go. Some of them go to other causes that are also important that this entity tries to pursue as well. A lot of those fees don't even go to the local. There's a misconception outside of certain communities. Most communities do not make any significant amount of, so there's not a lot of extra fee there on that proportion of it, but also look at, through the judicial system where some of the rest of those fees are going. Sometimes there are special fees that are tapped onto these fines that go to things actually that we want to happen. So we got to be careful about that as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Good point.
Thank you. Anyone else with any other thoughts or comments? I don't see anyone. I'll just wrap up with a point that I also made yesterday, and Lindsay, you kind of glossed over it again at the beginning, but when you went back to sort of the recommendations, if you looked at that little table that you had, that the two top line things, and I think the top line one was implementing the Onto 2050 plan. And the point that I made yesterday is these are all good policies and activities for us as a region to come together and pursue, but fundamentally to really move the needle on getting accessibility and access to the transportation network as a whole, and specifically in the transit space, is land use and the connection between land use and transportation and how we think about that. So if they're supportive and there is that sort of synergy between the two. So we are providing development and land use that is conducive to giving people access to from the public transportation side. So that was a point I raised yesterday. I do have, though, a kind of a follow-up, just a final question for the staff is, so this is a report, is that going to, I think we need to kind of continue to sort of rally people around, maybe do more work around this stuff. So what's the plan for getting that kind of further out there into a broader public domain? And then secondly, what are your next steps with this work?
Sure. So right now we are working on wrapping everything up. And then, yes, we view this in some ways as somewhat of a first step, because we do want to work to get this out there and think through what we want to prioritize and start with first. That's one of the reasons why we were interested in hearing how some of these recommendations really fit with priorities of your agencies to help us think through how to move forward. But yes, we'd like to really work on getting this work out there and finding partners to work with to pursue these strategies. I'm excited about the work, and again, this is something I think that we view as somewhat of a first step.
And Leanne, to answer, if I saw Laura, you turned your camera on. Do you want to speak to the implementation sort of activities that we hope come out of this?
Yeah, I just was going to address that. I mean, I think we're going to be, doing a full launch publicly of the report and materials that go along with that in the coming weeks. We want to work with all of you. And then we've actually created a whole implementation framework. As Lindsay mentioned, there'll be a few things that we prioritize and move forward. But we also know that a lot of our not only implementing partners, but advocacy partners want to take on some of these issues as well. So there's a lot in this report, and it's not like we're gonna be able to do everything all at once. So kind of prioritizing what we might be able to do immediately and what's gonna take some longer term activities. And so we definitely are focused on how we're gonna approach it, both from us internally and then working with our partners and advocacy groups to help move some of the other pieces along. Again, state legislators, federal legislators will need to be brought in on many of these. So we're looking at spending some time on it in the next fiscal year and this year as well.
Okay, that's good to hear, because that was sort of, I guess my point was to actually execute most of this is not Cmap's, it's sort of outside of Cmap's purview and jurisdiction. So it's going to necessitate kind of that broader buy-in, support and partners, and many of the implementing agencies are sort of sitting here as part of the MPO Policy Committee. So I think that's good to hear. Thank you.
And lastly, if I could just add, Leanne, if there are places or meetings that you have in your communities that it would be helpful to have sort of a grounding conversation about this research, I think that's one of the other opportunities that we would look to, is just to share this with your boards or your organizations locally that might have some interest in advancing some of these goals, or even as just sort of providing that foundational sort of education on how, I mean, I think until you look at the data and if you haven't thought about how fares might impact low-income households disproportionately, if we can help bring that conversation to your agency, we're happy to support you in initial conversations as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you, guys. Okay, anything else? This was just a discussion item only, but if anything else, otherwise we can move on to the next item. Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Great work. Good presentation too. All right, we will move on to item number 7, which is the RTA is going to present the Human Services Transportation Plan. Heather Mullins from the RTA staff, welcome you. And if you wouldn't mind running through that presentation. Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Leanne. Again, my name is Heather Mullins. I'm the Division Manager for Local Planning and Program Management at the RTA, and I'm going to give an overview of our Human Services Transportation Plan, also known as the Hstp, that we recently wrapped up. Next slide. Okay, so what is a Human Services Transportation Plan? A locally developed coordinated public transit human services transportation plan, also known as the HSTP, identifies the transportation needs for individuals with disabilities, seniors, and people with low incomes. It also provides strategies for meeting those local needs and prioritizes transportation services and projects for funding and implementation. Next slide. And why do we have an HSTP? The Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, requires that projects selected for funding under the Section 5310 program be included in a locally developed coordinated public transit human services transportation plan, and that plan be developed and approved through a process that included participation by seniors, individuals with disabilities, representatives of public, private, and nonprofit, transportation and human services providers, and other members of the public. The RTA originally created and adopted an HSTP back in 2007, and then updated that plan again in 2013 to bring it in line with new regulations enacted under MAP 21. And in an effort to keep the HSTP in line with current trends and needs, the RTA initiated another update in April of 2020. Next slide. So a little bit about the Section 5310 program that I referenced. This is a formula grant program administered by the FTA that provides assistance to public transportation projects that focus on enhancing mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. The RTA has administered this program and other similar federal programs since 2006 and became the designated recipient for Section 5310 with the Illinois Department of Transportation in 2013. So as the co-designated recipient for Section 5310, the RTA awards and administers operating, mobility management, capital improvement projects, while IDOT retains responsibility for awarding and administering grants for purchasing paratransit vehicles. Next slide. This is just a high-level overview of the timeline of this process. We kicked things off in April of 2020, took that summer to engage in our stakeholders, prepare an inventory of services, a demographic analysis, and start looking at what the needs and the gaps are. about July, and for the rest of the year, we started drafting our goals and strategies, working with the Project Advisory Committee, and had a draft final plan in early 2021 that we opened up for a public comment period in early February. Right now, we are going through our approval process. We brought this to the Transportation Committee a few weeks ago. We're now bringing this to the Policy Committee, looking for endorsement of the plan, and then we will be bringing this to our board next week for approval. Next slide. So this slide is just an overview of who was on our Project Advisory Committee, which is essentially the steering committee that we established for the project. We cast a pretty wide net with this committee. We had close to 50 participants in each meeting, included representatives from municipalities, counties, our service boards, human services agencies, advocate organizations, and private providers. Next slide. And this is an overview of the stakeholder and the public input that we sought out as part of the project. We had over 40 key stakeholder interviews with transportation providers, government representatives, human service agency representatives, and advocates. We also had electronic surveys that we administered. We had about 350 returned from the general public, 180 that were administered to drivers, 35 completed by health and economic organizations, and we also had 4 of these Project Advisory Committee meetings. And just to continue on public involvement, we also held a series of virtual focus groups. We had 2 meetings in each county, with 1 meeting in Cook County, and then 2 larger regional meetings that were attended by anyone throughout the region. There were a total of 13 of these meetings with about 130 attendees, averaging about 10 people per meeting. Talked about topics such as mobility needs and medical and wellness needs, and we're able to drill down into what those needs were, what some of the challenges were, and to start looking at what some potential solutions are. We also conducted a demographic analysis to look at the propensity for transit use, looking at senior and poverty rates, looking at population, employment, and income forecasts, veteran and minority and disability incidents by county, and also developing indicators of higher need for public transit and human service transportation. Next slide. We also conducted a service inventory, and this helped us to identify geographic coverage and analysis of gaps for all the existing services, looking at availability of services on weekdays, evenings, and weekends, looking at the variety of services that were available by type to support the diverse needs of our riders, and also being able to look at what type of agency overlap there might be and the ability to share services or features or to consolidate some functions or services. Next slide. And we took all those inputs and together prepared what we're calling our emerging mobility needs and service gaps, which are identified on this slide. There are 7 of them. And quickly, those are the Pace Township co-sponsored service, Pace sponsored communications, municipal sponsored services, travel training challenges, information challenges, unserved or underserved populations or areas, and human service agency client transportation programs. And then we had the members of our Project Advisory Committee rank what they thought the highest priorities were among those needs. And so we developed 9 recommended goals and strategies to help meet those needs. I'm not going to go into these into great detail just in the interest of time, but I'll walk through them real quickly here. The first is to establish mobility management and travel training networks, to look at expanding service hours and areas, looking at coordinating fare media and implementing capped fares for certain trips that might be longer, more expensive, coordinating volunteer driver support programs, improving access to suburban jobs for residents with low incomes, expanding the consolidated vehicle procurement types that IDOT offers through their Section 5310 funding that they manage, exploring the potential for collaboration or consolidation of similar services that might be at the municipal, township, or county level, or even amongst human service agencies that provide transportation for their clients, looking at establishing a regional one call, one click service that could be essentially one-stop shop for finding service and arranging that service. And finally, to create an accessibility infrastructure database. Next slide. Looking towards implementation, we consider this a regional document that includes many different implementers. Certainly the RTA is one of those. And for us, our most applicable tool for implementing these recommendations is our Section 5310 program. And we do have a call for projects coming up later this month that will focus on implementing recommendations from the Hstp. There's 3 that we think are probably the most likely candidates for applications, and that's looking at the mobility management, expanded service areas and hours, and exploring collaboration and consolidation of similar services. A little more detail on the call for projects. This is a 2-year cycle, so this includes appropriations from 2020 and 2021. We have approximately 9.5 million that are available for projects. The call's opening on March 22nd, and applications are due on April 22nd. We'll spend the summer doing our application review and selection process and bring our recommended program of projects to our board for approval in August. And that wraps up my presentation. I guess if we have time for questions, I'm happy to take any.
Any questions or comments for Heather? I don't see nothing popping in chat. But Heather, thank you. I appreciate that. It is good work. And I think it's good that this, while many of the advisory committee and people that sort of worked with you on this, staff are represented on this, the MPO Policy Committee, I think it's good for us to hear at this level kind of that work and how it fits into some of these other puzzle pieces that we're all continuing to work on. So appreciate that.
Great.
We are looking actually for a motion from the Policy Committee to endorse the Human Services Transportation Plan. So if someone, can I get a motion in a second?
So moved. Scott Hennings.
Second.
Holly Bieneman.
Thank you. Erin, can you call the roll?
IDOT,
Aye.
CDOT,
Yes.
Cmap, Frank Beal,
Yes.
Cmap, Mayor Noak,
Yes.
CTA. Oh, Mike had to go. Cook County,
Yes.
Council of Mayors, Mayor Schilke,
Yes.
DuPage County,
Yes.
Tolway,
Yes.
Kane County,
Yes.
Kendall County,
Yes.
Lake County,
Yes.
McHenry County,
Yes.
Metra,
Yes.
Pace,
Yes.
RTA,
Yes.
and Will County. The endorsement from the committee carries.
Thanks, Erin. Appreciate that. And thanks, Heather. Okay, moving on to item number 8. Any other business to come before the Policy Committee?
Yeah, Leanne, if you don't mind, I just wanted to let everyone know that today, right during this meeting, Metro hosted an event with BOMA, which is the Building Managers and Association, as well as Wintrust, William Blair, Cranes, BMO Harris, and Northwestern Medicine. It was called Safe Return to Work Summit. If you want information on that, the website is chicagosafereturn.com. And it was about an hour and 15-minute presentation talking about the work that we've done on our train, what it is in terms of trying to bring people back into downtown and how to do that safely. I was on for the first 30 minutes. It started at 9 this morning and then was just kind of watching as it was here. So there were a number of different presentations. I encourage all of you to take a look at it. It will definitely share some insights on the work that we've done at the agency in terms of cleaning and air filtration, mask use, and all of those things. But then also from the various business associations and their perspective on returning to in-person work. So just wanted to throw that out there. Again, that website is ChicagoSafeReturn, all one word, .com. Thanks, Leanne.
No problem. Anyone else got any other items? Okay, then moving on to item number 9, public comment. Erin, do we have anybody for public comment?
I do not believe we have anybody for public comment today.
Okay. All right, going once, going twice. All right, moving on to item number 10. Next meeting is scheduled for June 10. Hopefully everyone can mark that in their calendars. And if there is nothing else, the final item, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Shelkey.
Second by Noak.
I think we can do this one as just a voice vote, Erin, right? I don't think we need to do roll call. So all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate good discussions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.